The antagonist is a character in a story that stands in opposition to the main character. They are usually referred to as villains, evil, or morally grey. They create a conflict that the protagonist must overcome, whether it be physically or mentally. But what happens when we try to retell a story from a different perspective? There has been a trend of retelling iconic stories from the perspective of the antagonist. Some have worked to an extent, others felt like they just changed so much of the plot that they missed the entirety of what makes those characters memorable in the first place, and created something that is completely different. But there is one that stands out to me among the rest. A story that uses one, if not fiction's most iconic and devious mastermind, and chooses to redefine their story as one of brilliance, justice, and sacrifice. This is a story that is near and dear to my heart. It is a series that I always come back to amidst the ever-growing spew of fresh media slop to consume. My name is Samuel Stormer, and this is the genius of Moriarty the Patriot, and how I was able to redefine an already existing saga with a fresh and unique perspective that respects the roots from which it came. The Classic Adventures of Sherlock Holmes is a literary icon. Produced in the late 1800s by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, we follow detective consultant Sherlock Holmes and his assistant/best friend, John Watson, as they uncover the truth behind unsolvable crimes all over Britain. Whether you've seen the movies with Robert Downey Jr., the episodic series with Benedict Cumberbatch, or just something else entirely, I can guarantee that you have definitely seen a version or a parody of the great detective at least once. This symbolizes his importance in the storytelling world and the legacy that he and his incredible mind have left behind. Now, when I started my journey down the anime rabbit hole back in early 2021, there were so many series for me to check out, and fair to say, I was overwhelmed. And during this time, there was a new series releasing at the time called Moriarty the Patriot, and even though it took me a while to get to, it became one of my favorite series ever. Before becoming his rival, James Moriarty was a man who chose to fight against the injustices of the corrupt nobility. With a keen analytical mind and charisma to boot, Moriarty uses his skills to put together schemes and tricks to pass judgment onto those who dare do wrong against the common man, by providing his services as a crime consultant. But as more and more events unfold, the introduction of a new detective shakes up Moriarty's operations, and just how will this game of cat and mouse unfold? Quite interesting, isn't it? A retelling of the classic story of Sherlock from the perspective of his greatest nemesis. But instead of an old, creepy man, it's a hot blonde twink. I can't believe I wrote that down. Yes, there was a lot of confusion when I started this, but what I was presented with was nothing short of exhilarating. Whether you're reading the manga or watching the anime, the first 2 chapters are enough to intrigue your interest. Allow me to provide you a summary of the first chapter of the manga, The Scarlet Eyes, which is episode 2 in the anime. We're presented with this young boy, Albert James Moriarty, the son of a wealthy noble. He's tasked by his father to find a new son to adopt into their family, all under the guise to impress a woman within the noble's inner circle. Albert comes across 2 young boys, one of them suffering from an illness, while the other is gifted with a vast intelligence and creativity. After bringing them before the rest of his family, they all scoff and treat them like slaves, even though they're meant to be part of their family. The 2 boys face cruelty upon cruelty at the hands of those who offered them this place of safety, further upsetting Albert to the point where he hated the same nobility he was a part of. One night, Albert approaches the older of the 2 brothers and asks him to help rid the world of this corruption and evil that has plagued the world and the noble class. In that moment, the 3 formed a pact and set about to bring this new change, and in doing so, they choose their first target, Albert's own family. Yes, in a single night, their hearts were set, and they went about their plan. They opened all the gas valves in the mansion and let it combust, with everyone still inside, leaving no survivors and no witnesses. No one alive could prove that it was them, and none of it could be traced back. Now all 3 were brothers in not just name, but cause. The older of the 2 boys impersonates Albert's younger brother William, and thus William James Moriarty will lead his brothers into a new age This is just chapter 1, by the way. As time passes for the story, and they are now adults, it's where we can get a better understanding of their roles as brothers, and a grasp on how each of them contribute to their goal of reform. And something that I find quite interesting is that each Moriarty takes on a unique role that reflects all the facets of Britain. The youngest, Lewis, the one who was sick, sticks to the shadows and keeps to secrecy. While serving as a Williams attaché and a kind of managerial role of the Moriarty estate, Lewis is the most willing to sully his hands of the three. He uses connections throughout the underworld to gather intelligence and secure supplies. While his role isn't as explained as it could be in the anime, it's much better shown in the manga. His connection to William is something that he treasures greatly. He views his brother as some sort of divine being, and given the setting this world is in, it makes sense. Albert serves as the inside man within the British Parliament, using his experience in the British Army as a high-ranking officer to help restore some of the family's lost reputation after the fire. This allows him to monitor and engage with the inner workings of government, getting to know key players, learning about their interests, and gathering information that is top secret and usually kept away from the prying eyes, and be able to leverage some influence to set up and organize events that work in their favor. William is the face of the big three. Being the mastermind, it makes sense that everything revolves around his say-so and his machinations. Everyone under their employ knows this and follows the tasks he gives to the letter out of sheer awe and respect. He is a man who dedicates himself to everyone, whether they be noble or commoner. He will judge you on your merit and actions instead of your history and lineage, while not afraid to use you as a pawn in a bigger game. While these three are the main force of Moriarty, there are two supporting characters throughout the story's runtime that are under William's employ. The first is Colonel Moran, a former officer in the British Army and an exceptional marksman. Funnily enough, if you know your Sherlock Holmes knowledge, you know that Moran is another antagonist from Doyle's works. In those, he was also under the employ of Moriarty, but in this version, he's given more of a morally just kind of role to better align with this version of Moriarty's history. The same can be said about the other member of Moriarty's troupe, that being Fred Porlock, a character that existed in Doyle's original scripts, but only served in a minor role. In this version of the story, Fred serves as a jack of all trades, informant, stunt double, co-conspirator, and other roles that arise for whatever the situation calls for. There are other characters I want to talk about, but I think it's best that I'd rather let the story reveal themselves to you, as it would make for a much better surprise. All of these individuals come together to form the equivalent of an Ocean's 11 team to bring justice to the corrupt. You're gonna hate me for saying this, but this is just Persona 5 if it was set in the 1890s and there was no supernatural elements. I am not sorry. We're given enough time to get to know and learn about each and every character, and what they contribute to the overall story. Each person has a role, and together, anything feels possible. And for anyone wondering, yes, we're gonna talk about him, just give me a second. No story about the Lord of Crime would be complete without his greatest nemesis. And in Moriarty the Patriot, there's only one man for the job, Sherlock Holmes. He's a character who delivers a new and fun interpretation of Doyle's original design. While we've seen so many different interpretations of the great detective over the decades, like whether that be mentioned before in IDJ's rendition in the early 2000s or Eggs Benedict Cucumber's modern portrayal in 2015, each of them provide their own unique and interesting interpretations. I found myself loving Moriarty the Patriot's interpretation the most. I spent a while trying to come up with a reason as to why, but every time I tried, it just felt like it was getting harder and harder. And given the time that I'm writing the script, to say that I love his character for the portrayal of good vibes would have had a very different meaning. This version of Sherlock is cocky and more expressive. His energy is easier to follow along with, and you can't help but just get caught up in his antics. He possesses a childlike demeanor in his excitement, with the control of a fully grown adult, if that makes sense. Something that immediately sets this series apart from the original is the relationship between William and Sherlock. Since their feud is the entire story, it makes sense that the dynamic between them is always being tested. While their interactions and moments together are scattered and somewhat few, the moments they are together are nothing short of intense, exciting, and they fill you with this sense of curiosity. A great example of their chemistry together is easily episodes 10 and 11, when the two need to solve a crime together on a train. A crime for once that William has no involvement in. Before the reveal of a crime on board, we're treated to a moment where Sherlock spots William on the train and without any pause, just runs up and shuffles into his booth and starts talking with William as if they've always been friends. yet they've only met once before. And he completely ignores Lewis sitting next to him. He sees William as an equal of sorts, someone he can be himself around, besides John. But in this scenario, he's able to engage with someone as smart as him, making him finally feel as if he has someone he can properly connect to within this world. And for William, he sees Sherlock from a similar perspective, someone who is just like him, able to see the world in the same intricacy that he does. And he knows that if handled correctly, Sherlock could end up being the greatest asset for his cause. He perceives Sherlock as a version of himself that exists in the light, able to guide and provide hope without the need to lurk in the shadows alone. The relationship between the Lord of Crime and the Great Detective is something that, at the core, is a bout between two friends and their differing ideologies in order to help the British Empire from the brink of collapse. We know that soon they will need to face each other, not as friends, but as enemies. And all we can do is watch as Sherlock solves the clues left for him to find the truth. And as Moriarty continues his crusade to rid the world of evil, his actions will slowly catch up to him. Will these two geniuses be able to face each other properly? Or will they both have a lingering feeling of guilt? Only time will tell. Moriarty the Patriot is unlike any other series I've had the pleasure of reading. A retelling of Sherlock Holmes from the perspective of the villain is not what I expected to see in a manga. In fact, there's something I need to confess here. I don't have just one volume of the manga. Not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, 6, 7, or 8. I have all 14 volumes of the manga. I'm not usually a manga collector. I've only collected for a couple of series, those being Shield Hero, Black Clover, the occasional Spy Family, and Dr. Stone. But something about this story this time made me just constantly want to pick up what came next. No other series has made me want to do that, and I waited patiently every day for a new copy. And as I was reading and researching for this video, I learned something even cooler about this series. The manga was adapted for the stage. It was turned into a full-on play in Japan. It just shows how a story like this can choose to honor its source and deliver it in a new and unique perspective that is available for anyone to interpret and enjoy. It's not perfect. Nothing is. It does have some teeny flaws, but they're not really worth pointing out. But with everything in mind, this is a fantastic thriller that anyone can pick up. And I will say this now, there is a lot more content in the manga that has been cut, but the anime is still quite good. So if you want the full experience, I highly recommend the manga. Have you watched Moriarty the Patriot? Are you willing to give it a try? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you everyone so much for watching this video. My name is Sam Stormer, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.